I still remember the exact words that shattered my world. "Your cultural sensitivity training is wasted time. Terminated." Bradley Richardson's voice cut through the air like a blade as I sat across from his polished mahogany desk. 3 years of building international relationships, mastering cultural protocols, learning languages, all dismissed with cold corporate efficiency. Tomorrow marked the biggest moment in Peterson Technologies' history, signing the $360 million partnership with Yamamoto Industries from Japan. I had cultivated this relationship from nothing, spent countless months understanding their customs, their intricate business etiquette, their values. Now I was being erased from the most significant achievement of my career just 24 hours before the ceremonial signing that would transform our struggling tech company forever into an international powerhouse. My hands trembled as I walked through the parking lot toward my Honda Civic, the California sunshine feeling mockingly bright against the darkness consuming my thoughts. How could this be happening? I needed to process what had just occurred, but my mind kept circling back to how we had reached this devastating moment. 3 years ago, I joined Peterson Technologies as their first Cultural Liaison, a position created specifically for me by CEO Margaret Donovan. Fresh out of graduate school with my master's degree in international business from UC Berkeley, I was fluent in Japanese and Mandarin, having grown up in San Francisco's Richmond district, where my neighbors spoke 12 different languages. The company was drowning then. Only 50 employees crammed into a converted warehouse space, barely generating enough revenue to cover payroll each month. Margaret Donovan had built Peterson Technologies from her garage after losing her engineering job during the dot-com crash. She was a brilliant software developer, but struggled with the interpersonal aspects of business expansion. When she hired me, she was desperate. "Cindy, we need to grow internationally or we'll be bankrupt within 18 months, she had said during my interview. I believe technology should connect cultures, not divide them. My early successes kept the company breathing. I secured a $15 million partnership with a Seoul-based gaming company, followed by an $8 million licensing deal in Taiwan. These weren't massive contracts, but they provided the steady income stream that allowed Peterson Technologies to survive, while larger competitors failed around us. The Yamamoto Industries opportunity came from an unexpected encounter at the International Technology Expo in Tokyo. I was representing Peterson Technologies at a modest 10-foot booth when Kenji Yamamoto, a distinguished gentleman in his 60s, stopped to examine our facial recognition software demonstration. Most attendees had walked past our small display, but Mr. Yamamoto studied our technology with genuine interest. Our conversation began in English, but when I switched to Japanese to better explain the technical specifications, his entire demeanor changed. He appreciated that I understood the importance of context in Japanese communication, not just the words, but the cultural framework surrounding them. We talked for 2 hours about technology, but more importantly about respect tradition and the responsibility companies have to their communities. Building the relationship with Yamamoto Industries required 8 months of careful cultivation. I learned that Kenji Yamamoto valued personal connections above profit margins. His company had been family-owned for 3 generations, and he viewed business partnerships as long-term commitments between people, not just corporate entities. Every email exchange, every video conference, every document required cultural consideration. The potential deal was extraordinary, an exclusive software licensing agreement worth $360 million over 5 years. Yamamoto Industries would integrate Peterson Technologies' artificial intelligence systems into their manufacturing processes across 17 facilities in Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. For our small company, this contract represented transformation from survival mode to genuine prosperity. Everything changed 6 months ago when Bradley Richardson joined as Vice President of Operations. Harvard MBA, previous experience at Fortune 500 companies, impeccable resume filled with efficiency improvements and cost reductions. Margaret hired him to streamline our operations as we prepared for rapid growth. From his first day, Richardson viewed my role with suspicion. During staff meetings, he would interrupt my cultural briefings with comments like, Can we focus on numbers instead of customs? He questioned every line item in my department budget, demanding justification for translation services, cultural consulting fees, and international travel expenses. When I explained the necessity of these investments for maintaining relationships, he would roll his eyes and mutter about unnecessary overhead. The tension escalated as the Yamamoto signing approached. I had spent weeks coordinating the perfect ceremony, a traditional tea service in our renovated boardroom proper seating arrangements that honored Japanese hierarchy, carefully selected gifts that demonstrated our respect for their culture. Each detail mattered because each detail communicated our values to our partners. Richardson challenged every element. "Why do we need a tea ceremony for a business meeting?" he demanded during our final preparation session. "Modern business is about efficiency, not pageantry." When I explained that the ceremony was integral to Japanese business culture, he dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Cindy, you're overthinking this. Good deals sell themselves." The breaking point came during yesterday's executive meeting. I was presenting the final cultural protocol checklist when Richardson stood up abruptly. "Margaret, I need to speak with you privately about operational efficiency." They disappeared into her office for 90 minutes while I waited in the conference room, reviewing my notes and trying to calm my growing anxiety. When they emerged, Margaret looked uncomfortable but resolute. "Cindy Bradley has made some compelling arguments about streamlining our processes," she said carefully. "We've decided to simplify the signing ceremony to focus on business fundamentals." I felt my stomach drop. "Margaret, the cultural elements aren't optional. They're part of our memorandum of understanding with Yamamoto Industries. Mr. Yamamoto specifically requested traditional protocols." Richardson stepped forward, his expression cold and calculating. "Cindy, your cultural sensitivity training is wasted time. Terminated." The words hit me like physical blows. We don't need elaborate ceremonies to close deals. We need results. Now sitting in my car outside the office building, I realized the full magnitude of what Richardson had done. He hadn't just fired me. He had destroyed 3 years of relationship building with our most important partner. Tomorrow's signing ceremony would be a disaster because he fundamentally misunderstood what we were actually selling to Yamamoto Industries. We weren't just licensing software. We were proposing a cultural bridge between two business philosophies. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh, our head of finance. "Can't believe what just happened. Call me when you're ready to talk." But I wasn't ready to talk. I was ready to fight. By the time I reached my apartment in the Mission District, panic had transformed into desperate determination. I immediately called Dr. Sarah Chen, my former professor and mentor at Stanford Business School, who had guided me through countless professional challenges. "Cindy, slow down and tell me exactly what happened," Dr. Chen said after I frantically explained the situation. Her calm voice helped center my spinning thoughts. "This could constitute discrimination based on your expertise and cultural background," she continued after I finished my account. "You need to document everything. Emails, meeting notes, witness statements. But right now, your priority should be protecting that partnership." She was right, but I felt torn between self-preservation and loyalty to Peterson Technologies. Despite Richardson's betrayal, I couldn't bear watching 3 years of work collapse because of one man's arrogance. Margaret Donovan had given me my first real opportunity in corporate America. The other employees, Jennifer David Park from IT, Linda Thompson, they were good people who deserved better than Richardson's sabotage. I decided to reach Margaret directly, but her assistant informed me that Margaret was at the hospital. Her mother had suffered a stroke that morning and was undergoing emergency surgery. Margaret would be unreachable for at least 48 hours, completely unaware that her company's future was crumbling while she focused on her family crisis. Frustrated but undeterred, I began researching Richardson's background more thoroughly. What I discovered made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, Richardson had been quietly terminated from Brennan Industries following a failed merger with a German automotive company. According to industry publications I found online, the deal collapsed after Richardson insulted the German executives by dismissing their concerns about bureaucratic European business practices. The pattern was clear. Richardson viewed cultural considerations as obstacles to efficiency, rather than essential components of international business. He had learned nothing from his previous failure, and was about to repeat the same catastrophic mistakes with our Japanese partners. I called Professor Hiroshi Tanaka, who had taught my graduate-level course on Japanese business culture. Professor Tanaka had worked for Toyota's corporate headquarters in Nagoya for 20 years before transitioning to academia, and his insights into Japanese business psychology were unparalleled. Cindy, you must understand that for traditional Japanese executives like Kenji Yamamoto, respect and trust are more valuable than profit, Professor Tanaka explained when I described the situation. If they feel disrespected, or if protocols are ignored, they will walk away forever. Japanese business culture prioritizes long-term relationships over short-term gains. Without proper cultural acknowledgement, your Richardson will be communicating that your company views them as merely transactional partners rather than respected equals. His words confirmed my worst fears. Richardson was planning to treat Yamamoto Industries like any domestic client, completely ignoring the cultural framework that had made our partnership possible. I spent the rest of the evening researching documented cases of failed international deals caused by cultural insensitivity. The examples were numerous and devastating: a $2 billion technology transfer between American and Chinese companies that collapsed when the American CEO refused to participate in traditional gift exchange ceremonies. A pharmaceutical partnership between British and Japanese firms that ended when the British executives arrived late to meetings and dismissed hierarchical seating arrangements. I worked until 3 a.m, creating a comprehensive cultural protocol document that outlined every critical element of tomorrow's ceremony. The proper bow depth when greeting Mr. Yamamoto: 15 degrees for business equals 30 degrees for honored partners. The significance of removing shoes when entering the traditional tatami area we had prepared. The intricate business card exchange ritual where cards must be received with both hands and studied respectfully before being placed carefully on the table. The tea ceremony sequence that demonstrated our commitment to taking time for relationship building rather than rushing through transactions. When I tried to email the document to Richardson, I discovered he had already blocked my company email address. My access to Peterson Technologies' internal systems had been revoked immediately after my termination. I was locked out of the very partnership I had created. But the final blow came at sunrise when David Park, our IT director, called with devastating news. "Cindy, I thought you should know what Richardson has planned," David said quietly, clearly concerned about being overheard. "He's completely redesigned tomorrow's ceremony. No tea service, no cultural elements, no traditional boardroom setup. He's scheduled a modern American business lunch in the small conference room. Sandwiches from the deli down the street, 30-minute time limit, quick signatures and handshakes." My heart sank as I realized Richardson had systematically eliminated every element that would demonstrate respect for our Japanese partners. He was transforming what should be a ceremonial celebration of mutual partnership into a fast food transaction that would insult everything Kenji Yamamoto valued about business relationships. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't just be a signing ceremony, it would be a cultural catastrophe that would destroy Peterson Technologies forever. At 6 a.m, I sat in Cafe Luna across the street from Peterson Technologies, watching Richardson arrive early in his silver Mercedes. His confident stride and expensive suit projected success, but I knew his arrogance was about to cost everyone their livelihoods. The sleepless night had crystallized my thinking. I couldn't save the company alone, but I could build a coalition of employees who understood what was at stake. My plan required convincing people to risk their jobs for a principle Richardson couldn't comprehend: that respect for others ultimately determines business success. My first ally was Jennifer Walsh, our head of finance. Jennifer had been with Peterson Technologies for 8 years, surviving every crisis through careful financial management and genuine dedication to Margaret's vision. When I called her at 7:15, she agreed to meet me immediately. "Cindy, I'm so glad you reached out," Jennifer said as she slid into the booth across from me, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of stress. "What happened yesterday was completely wrong." "Thank you for believing in me," I replied, "but we have bigger problems than my termination. This deal is about to collapse and Richardson has no idea what he's destroying." Jennifer's expression grew grave. "The financial situation is worse than most people realize. Without this Yamamoto contract, we have approximately 60 days of operating capital remaining. This isn't just about growth anymore, it's about survival." Her revelation added urgency to our mission. Every employee's livelihood depended on tomorrow's success, but Richardson's approach virtually guaranteed failure. Jennifer agreed to help document Richardson's protocol violations and provide financial context to other employees who might support our intervention. Our next recruit was David Park, our Director of Information Technology. David had immigrated from South Korea 15 years ago and understood firsthand how cultural dismissiveness affected business relationships. When we approached him in the parking lot, his response was immediate. "I've been watching Richardson destroy months of preparation," David said, his frustration evident. "Yesterday, he told me to remove all the video conferencing equipment we installed for traditional Japanese virtual ceremonies. He wants everything simple and American. It's like he's deliberately trying to offend them." David revealed that Richardson had compressed the entire signing ceremony into 90 minutes, including lunch. No time for proper introductions, gift exchanges, or relationship-building conversations. In Japanese business culture, rushing through important ceremonies communicates disrespect and suggests the relationship isn't valued. Our growing network expanded to include Robert Martinez, the elderly security guard who had worked at Peterson Technologies since Margaret founded the company. Robert had witnessed every milestone in the company's growth and felt protective of its reputation. "Miss Cindy, I've seen a lot of executives come and go," Robert said when we explained the situation. "That Richardson fellow treats people like they're beneath him. Mrs. Donovan built this company on treating everyone with dignity, not just the ones who could make her money." Robert's position provided valuable access to building security and communication systems. More importantly, his loyalty to Margaret made him a powerful moral voice among longtime employees. The coalition expanded when Linda Thompson, Margaret's administrative assistant, approached us with her own concerns. Linda had been fielding increasingly worried calls from Akiko Sato Yamamoto Industries' cultural translator, who was confused about the sudden protocol changes. "Miss Sato keeps asking about the ceremony timeline and gift exchange procedures," Linda explained. "When I tell her Mr. Richardson has simplified everything, she gets very quiet. I think she's trying to warn her executives that something's wrong." Linda's access to executive communications gave us insight into Richardson's specific plans and the Japanese delegation's growing concerns. She also revealed that Richardson had been systematically excluding cultural considerations from all international partnerships, not just the Yamamoto deal. As our network grew, a pattern emerged. Richardson viewed efficiency as the only business virtue worth pursuing. He couldn't understand that different cultures define efficiency differently, and that what appeared wasteful to him might be essential relationship building to others. My emotional breaking point came when I called my father in Portland. Dad had immigrated from Mexico in his 20s and built a successful restaurant by learning to respect every cultural tradition represented in his diverse customer base. "Mija, sometimes success isn't about being right," he said after I explained my situation. "Sometimes it's about being wise enough to let other people be right too. This Richardson man, he thinks respect is weakness. But respect is what turns strangers into family." His words reminded me that my fight wasn't just about saving one business deal. It was about proving that cultural understanding creates value rather than destroying it, that diversity strengthens organizations rather than weakening them. But even with our growing alliance, we faced a fundamental problem. Richardson held all the official authority. He could dismiss our concerns as the complaints of disgruntled employees protecting an unnecessary colleague. We needed leverage that would force him to listen. That leverage arrived when Linda Thompson provided our most crucial intelligence, Richardson's detailed timeline for tomorrow's ceremony. What she showed us was even worse than David had described. Richardson planned exactly 15 minutes for the actual signing, a brief handshake photo opportunity with no cultural elements whatsoever. The Japanese delegation expected a 2-hour ceremony honoring the significance of our partnership. They would arrive prepared for traditional protocols and respectful relationship building. Instead, they would encounter a rushed business transaction that communicated contempt for everything they valued. Our intervention had to succeed because Richardson's approach guaranteed catastrophic failure. At 7:30 on the morning of the signing ceremony, I sat in my Honda Civic outside Peterson Technologies wearing a visitor's badge Jennifer had secretly arranged for me. My hands were steady now, my purpose clear. Everything I had worked for over 3 years would be decided in the next few hours. I had transformed my appearance completely professional Navy suit instead of my usual colorful dresses, hair pulled back in a severe bun rather than loose waves, temporary identification badge reading, Christina Davis, cultural consultant. If anyone questioned my presence, Jennifer had prepared a story about emergency consulting services for international partnerships. The scene unfolding in the parking lot confirmed my worst fears. 2 black Lincoln Town cars arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, carrying the Yamamoto Industries delegation. Through my binoculars, I watched Kenji Yamamoto emerge from the first vehicle, wearing a formal dark suit and traditional dignified bearing. His team followed in perfectly coordinated formation: Akiko Sato, their cultural translator, Hiroshi Yamada, their technical director, and Masako Fujita, their legal counsel. Most importantly, I noticed the wrapped packages they carried, traditional gifts prepared according to Japanese business protocol. They had invested significant time and resources in honoring this ceremony, expecting reciprocal respect from Peterson Technologies. My heart sank, knowing that Richardson had prepared nothing in return. Robert Martinez helped me enter through the building's rear loading dock, avoiding the main lobby where Richardson might spot me. The service corridors led to a storage room adjacent to Conference Room B, where I could observe the proceedings through a narrow window without being detected. The contrast between expectations and reality was immediately apparent. The Japanese delegation had clearly anticipated the formal boardroom with traditional setup we had originally planned. Instead, Richardson directed them to a casual conference room with fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs, and a folding table covered with deli sandwiches. I watched Kenji Yamamoto's polite confusion as Richardson dismissed Akiko Sato's questions about ceremonial protocols. "We've streamlined everything for efficiency," Richardson announced with inappropriate enthusiasm. "No need for time-consuming formalities." The cultural violations began immediately. Richardson thrust his hand forward for aggressive American-style handshakes while the Japanese team prepared for respectful bows. When they presented their traditional gifts, Richardson set them aside carelessly, without proper acknowledgement or reciprocal offerings. Each mistake compounded the growing tension in the room. Jennifer Walsh tried valiantly to slow the proceedings by asking detailed questions about financial projections and implementation timelines. Her questions were legitimate and thorough, designed to buy time, while hoping Margaret Donovan might somehow arrive to intervene. "Jennifer, we can cover those details later," Richardson interrupted impatiently. "Let's focus on getting signatures and closing this deal." David Park contributed to our delaying tactics by creating technical difficulties with the presentation equipment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson, but the projector seems to be malfunctioning. Perhaps we should postpone until everything is working properly." "Forget the presentation," Richardson snapped. "We have contracts to sign, not time to waste on technical problems." From my hiding place, I could see the Japanese delegation exchanging increasingly concerned glances. Kenji Yamamoto's expression had shifted from polite attention to barely concealed disappointment. Akiko Sato was whispering urgent translations to her colleagues, clearly trying to explain Richardson's behavior without causing additional offense. Desperation drove me to write a quick note explaining the cultural violations and Richardson's systematic dismissal of agreed-upon protocols. I passed the message to Linda Thompson during her routine coffee service, hoping she could discreetly deliver it to someone with authority to intervene. But Richardson intercepted the note before Linda could act. His face flushed red with anger as he read my warning about cultural insensitivity and the partnership's imminent collapse. "What is this?" he demanded, scanning the room suspiciously. "Who's been communicating with unauthorized personnel?" Linda remained silent, but Richardson's paranoia led him to check the adjacent rooms. When he discovered me in the storage area, his rage exploded. "Security, remove this terminated employee immediately," he shouted, causing the entire Japanese delegation to turn toward the commotion. "Cindy Henderson is trespassing and attempting to sabotage our partnership." As Robert Martinez and another security guard reluctantly escorted me toward the exit, I caught one final glimpse of the disaster I was powerless to prevent. Kenji Yamamoto had risen from his chair with obvious displeasure, speaking rapidly in Japanese to his translator, while Richardson tried desperately to regain control of the deteriorating situation. Through the confusion, I heard Akiko Sato's diplomatic translation. "Mr. Yamamoto is requesting clarification about the protocol changes and the status of the Cultural Liaison position." But it was too late. The damage had been done, and I was being removed from the building just as the cultural catastrophe I had predicted began to unfold in earnest. The most heartbreaking moment came as security dragged me through the lobby. I saw Kenji Yamamoto stand up abruptly, his dignity intact despite the chaos surrounding him. He began gathering his documents with the methodical precision of someone who had made an irrevocable decision, speaking quietly but firmly to his team in Japanese. Even from a distance, I could tell that our $360 million partnership was walking out the door. Sitting in my car in the Peterson Technologies parking lot, I refused to leave despite being escorted out by security. Through the building's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the disaster continuing to unfold, and my phone buzzed constantly with updates from Jennifer Walsh inside the conference room. "Richardson is in full panic mode," Jennifer texted. Mr. Yamamoto asked about the ceremonial elements, and Richardson said, "We don't need ceremony for good business." The whole Japanese team just went completely silent. I watched through my binoculars as body language told the story that words couldn't convey. Kenji Yamamoto sat perfectly straight, his hands folded formally in his lap, while Richardson gestured wildly in what appeared to be aggressive sales tactics. The cultural disconnect was visible even from the parking lot. Akiko Sato, the translator, faced an impossible situation. I could see her carefully choosing words clearly, trying to soften Richardson's dismissive comments without outright lying to her own executives. Her diplomatic training was being tested beyond reasonable limits as Richardson continued making culturally insensitive statements. "He just told them, 'We don't have time for cultural consultation nonsense,'" David Park texted from his position at the technical equipment. Mr. Yamamoto definitely understood that in English. His face just went stone cold. The 15-minute recess that Kenji Yamamoto requested for private consultation with his team stretched to 45 minutes, then an hour. Through the windows, I could see the Japanese delegation engaged in intense but controlled discussion in the hallway, while Richardson paced the conference room like a caged animal. "They're debating whether to leave," Jennifer reported. "I can't understand Japanese, but their body language is pretty clear." Mr. Yamamoto keeps shaking his head. I made a desperate phone call to Professor Tanaka, explaining the crisis and begging for his help. He agreed to conference call Peterson Technologies as an independent cultural expert who might provide legitimate intervention. "I'll call their main number and ask to speak with whoever is handling the Japanese partnership," Professor Tanaka said. "Perhaps I can offer emergency cultural mediation services." When the call came through to Richardson, I watched his reaction through the windows. Even from a distance, his gestures conveyed complete dismissal of Professor Tanaka's offer to help. According to Linda Thompson's later account, Richardson's exact words were, "We don't need some university professor telling us how to run business meetings." That response proved to be the final straw. Kenji Yamamoto had been standing near the conference room door when Richardson spoke, and his English was sufficient to understand the contempt in Richardson's voice toward cultural expertise. The moment of truth arrived when Richardson attempted to force the signing ceremony to continue despite the obvious tension. "Gentlemen, we have contracts that need signatures," he announced with false confidence. "Let's finish this business and move forward." Kenji Yamamoto responded with a direct question that cut through all diplomatic politeness. "Where is the cultural liaison who arranged this partnership? The woman who understood our requirements and protocols?" Richardson's answer sealed Peterson Technologies' fate. "She was unnecessary, so we eliminated her position yesterday." The silence that followed felt eternal even from my position in the parking lot. I could see the Japanese delegation exchange glances of shocked disbelief. In their business culture, eliminating the person responsible for cultural protocol on the eve of a major ceremony was equivalent to announcing that the partnership itself was considered unimportant. What happened next will remain burned in my memory forever. Kenji Yamamoto stood slowly, his dignity intact despite the cultural assault he had endured. He faced the empty chair where I should have been seated and performed a formal 15-degree bow, a gesture of respect for the absent cultural liaison position that Richardson had thoughtlessly destroyed. Through Akiko Sato's translation, his words were diplomatically devastating. "Without the cultural liaison, this meeting violates our memorandum of understanding. The protocols we agreed upon were not suggestions, but requirements for mutual respect." Richardson's desperate attempts to salvage the situation only made everything worse. "We can handle cultural issues ourselves," he insisted. "You don't need a special employee for basic courtesy." But courtesy wasn't the issue. Competence was. Kenji Yamamoto's team began collecting their materials with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had made an irrevocable decision. They thanked everyone politely for their time, gathered their unacknowledged gifts, and walked toward the exit with their dignity intact. "He's standing up. They're leaving," Jennifer texted with obvious panic. Richardson is following them down the hall, literally begging them to reconsider. Through the lobby windows, I watched the Japanese delegation exit the building with calm professionalism, while Richardson continued his futile pursuit. They climbed into their waiting vehicles without looking back, carrying $360 million in partnership opportunities away from Peterson Technologies forever. But the real shock was yet to come. As the Lincoln Town cars disappeared down the street, a familiar blue BMW pulled into the parking lot at dangerous speed. Margaret Donovan had arrived from the hospital to find the biggest opportunity in her company's history, driving away while her new VP stood in the parking lot red-faced and gesturing helplessly at the departing vehicles. The reckoning was about to begin. Margaret Donovan's face told the entire story as she rushed from her car toward the building. Even from across the parking lot, I could see the devastation in her expression as she processed the scene, Japanese vehicles disappearing down the street, Richardson standing alone in obvious failure, and her company's future crumbling while she had been at her mother's bedside. My phone rang immediately. Margaret's voice was tight with controlled anger and desperate urgency. "Cindy, get in here right now. I need to understand what happened, and I need to understand it immediately." This time I walked through the front door with my head held high. The security guards who had escorted me out 90 minutes earlier stepped aside respectfully, clearly understanding that the power dynamic had shifted completely. The conference room aftermath looked like a crime scene. Scattered documents covered the table where signatures should have been abandoned. Presentation materials sat unused on the sideboard, and the carefully prepared traditional gifts from Yamamoto Industries remained unwrapped and forgotten in the corner, a painful symbol of dismissed respect and squandered opportunity. Richardson attempted damage control the moment Margaret entered the room. "Margaret, I'm glad you're here. We had some unexpected complications with the Japanese delegation, but I believe we can reschedule and move forward with a more practical approach." Margaret's expression could have frozen fire. "Bradley, be quiet. I want to hear from everyone else first." What followed was the most thorough corporate investigation I had ever witnessed. Margaret questioned Jennifer Walsh, David Park, Linda Thompson, and Robert Martinez, individually building a complete picture of Richardson's systematic dismantling of cultural protocols and his fundamental misunderstanding of international business relationships. Jennifer's financial testimony was particularly devastating. "Margaret, without this Yamamoto contract, we have approximately 60 days of operating capital remaining. This wasn't just about expansion, this was about survival. Richardson eliminated our most experienced international relationship manager on the eve of our most important partnership signing." David Park provided technical evidence through email records and communication logs. Richardson specifically instructed me to remove all cultural ceremonial elements from the presentation. When I asked about Japanese protocol requirements, he said they were politically correct nonsense that wastes time and money. Linda Thompson's administrative records revealed a pattern of problematic behavior extending beyond the Yamamoto situation. "Mr. Richardson has been systematically dismissing concerns from all our international partners. I have documented complaints about his rudeness from contacts in South Korea, Taiwan, and Germany. But the most damning evidence came from my detailed explanation of each cultural violation and its significance in Japanese business relationships." Margaret listened with growing horror as I described Richardson's systematic assault on everything that made our partnership valuable to Yamamoto Industries. "He eliminated the gift exchange ceremony, which communicates mutual respect between business equals," I explained. "He refused proper greeting protocols which establish hierarchical relationships and demonstrate cultural awareness. He compressed the signing ceremony into 15 minutes, which suggests the partnership isn't worthy of time investment. Most critically, he terminated the cultural liaison position, which tells Japanese executives that we view cultural considerations as unnecessary expenses rather than essential relationship elements." Margaret's investigation expanded to Richardson's hiring credentials, revealing information that should have disqualified him from employment at Peterson Technologies. His resume had omitted his termination from Brennan Industries, where he had destroyed a $2 billion merger with German automotive executives through similar cultural insensitivity. "Bradley, you lied during your interview process." Margaret said, her voice deadly calm. "You were specifically asked about international experience, and you failed to disclose a termination for cultural incompetence." Richardson's desperate attempts to shift blame only deepened his troubles. Margaret Cindy sabotaged this deal by undermining my authority and confusing the Japanese delegation with unnecessary complications. Jennifer Walsh's defense of my actions was immediate and passionate. Margaret Cindy tried to save the partnership that Richardson was destroying through ignorance and arrogance. She documented every cultural requirement and warned about every protocol violation. Richardson fired her to eliminate the voice that could have prevented this disaster. The emergency board meeting was called for that afternoon, but the outcome was already clear. Every employee testimony, every documented incident, and every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion: Richardson's hiring had been the biggest mistake in Peterson Technologies' corporate history. The unanimous board decision was swift and merciless. Richardson's immediate termination for cause, including fraud in the hiring process, destruction of critical business relationships, and systematic violation of corporate diversity and inclusion policies. Margaret's personal apology to me was both heartfelt and professionally significant. "Cindy, I should have trusted your expertise over his MBA credentials. I let efficiency arguments override relationship wisdom, and that nearly destroyed everything we've built together." The settlement discussion for my wrongful termination was generous: full reinstatement with promotion to Director of International Relations, significant salary increase, and expanded departmental authority. But money couldn't repair the damage Richardson had caused to our most important partnership. The critical question remained: could the relationship with Yamamoto Industries be salvaged after such a profound breach of trust and cultural protocol? The answer came from an unexpected source. Professor Tanaka called just as we finished the board meeting with news that offered a glimmer of hope in our darkest moment. "Cindy, I spoke with Kenji Yamamoto personally this afternoon," Professor Tanaka said. "Despite his deep disappointment, he is willing to give Peterson Technologies one final opportunity, but only under very specific conditions. You must personally lead the cultural reconciliation process. The apology must follow traditional Japanese protocols, and Margaret Donovan must demonstrate genuine commitment to cultural understanding rather than mere business efficiency." One final chance. After everything Richardson had destroyed, we had one opportunity to prove that Peterson Technologies deserved partnership with one of Japan's most respected companies. The redemption phase was about to begin. 2 weeks later, I stood in the elegant lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in San Francisco, wearing traditional business attire and carrying the weight of Peterson Technologies' entire future on my shoulders. This was more than a business meeting. It was cultural diplomacy of the highest order, requiring perfect execution of every protocol Richardson had dismissed as unnecessary. My transformation from terminated employee to Director of International Relations felt surreal, but the real change was in Peterson Technologies itself. Margaret Donovan had committed the company to comprehensive cultural competency training for all employees, starting with herself. She spent hours with Professor Tanaka, learning basic Japanese greetings, understanding hierarchical relationships, and appreciating the deep significance of respect in business relationships. The preparation process consumed every waking moment for 14 days. Working with Professor Tanaka and traditional ceremony experts from the Japanese Cultural Center, we designed an authentic reconciliation experience that would demonstrate genuine understanding rather than superficial gestures. The venue selection was crucial: a private tatami room at the Four Seasons that provided traditional Japanese atmosphere while maintaining the formal dignity appropriate for high-level business discussions. Every detail required careful consideration: the seasonal flower arrangements that honored late autumn beauty, the handcrafted ceramic tea service that showed appreciation for Japanese artisanship, the carefully selected traditional music that created contemplative atmosphere without distraction. Margaret's personal transformation was remarkable. The driven entrepreneur who once viewed cultural training as inefficient overhead now understood that respect for others was the foundation of sustainable business success. She practiced proper bowing techniques until her movements felt natural, studied gift-giving protocols, until she understood the symbolic significance of each gesture and worked with language tutors to master basic Japanese phrases with correct pronunciation and intonation. The gifts we prepared represented Peterson Technologies' deepest commitment to cultural understanding. Instead of corporate promotional items, we commissioned handcrafted pieces from local artisans, a wooden sculpture celebrating the intersection of technology and nature created by a master woodworker in Mendocino, a series of botanical prints featuring California native plants hand-painted by an artist whose work honored traditional Japanese aesthetic principles, and custom tea ceremony implements crafted by a ceramicist who had studied in Kyoto for 5 years. Kenji Yamamoto arrived with a larger delegation than before, including senior cultural advisors and traditional protocol specialists. Their presence communicated that this meeting carried exceptional significance within Yamamoto Industries' corporate hierarchy, both an honor and a challenge that demanded our absolute best performance. The ceremony began with my formal apology delivered in carefully practiced Japanese. Every word had been reviewed with Professor Tanaka for accuracy and cultural appropriateness. I acknowledged not just the protocol violations, but the deeper failure they represented, a lack of respect for the wisdom and values that Japanese business culture had developed over centuries. Yamamoto-san, watakushi tachi wafukaku owabi itashimasu, I said, bowing deeply with genuine humility. We deeply apologize. Our company failed to honor the trust and respect you placed in our partnership. Margaret's speech followed, delivered in English, but structured according to Japanese communication principles that prioritized relationship acknowledgement over business objectives. She spoke about learning from mistakes, valuing cultural wisdom, and committing Peterson Technologies to long-term partnership building rather than short-term transaction completion. Mr. Yamamoto, I have learned that true leadership means understanding that different cultures possess different forms of wisdom, Margaret said. Your approach to business relationships has taught me that efficiency without respect is ultimately inefficient because it destroys the trust that makes genuine partnership possible. The traditional tea ceremony that followed provided the relationship-building time that Richardson had dismissed as wasteful. But these quiet moments allowed real connection to develop between our leadership teams. Kenji Yamamoto shared stories about his grandfather's business philosophy. Margaret talked about her vision for technology that serves human communities rather than replacing them, and I facilitated conversations that built understanding between different cultural perspectives. When we finally transitioned to business discussions, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Instead of rushing through contract terms, both teams explored how our partnership could create value that transcended mere profit. The revised agreement that emerged was worth $420 million over 6 years, expanded because restored trust had revealed additional collaboration opportunities. More importantly, Yamamoto Industries committed to introducing Peterson Technologies to their network of Japanese technology partners, creating opportunities for multiple additional relationships worth hundreds of millions in potential revenue. What Richardson had viewed as time-wasting ceremony had actually been relationship-building investment that multiplied our business opportunities exponentially. My new role as Director of International Relations included establishing Peterson Technologies' Asian-Pacific Division, hiring a multicultural team of cultural liaisons for different regions, and developing comprehensive protocols for respectful international business practices. The company that had barely survived month to month was now preparing for global expansion based on cultural competency rather than cultural dismissal. The ripple effects extended throughout Peterson Technologies' corporate culture. Other employees felt empowered to speak up about workplace issues, knowing that the leadership would listen to expertise over hierarchy. Jennifer Walsh was promoted to Chief Financial Officer. David Park became Director of International Technology Development, and Linda Thompson advanced to Executive Assistant for Global Operations. Richardson's aftermath served as a cautionary tale throughout the tech industry. Unemployed and facing lawsuits from his previous company, as well as Peterson Technologies, he became an example of how cultural incompetence destroys careers and companies. His failure helped validate the business case for cultural diversity and international relationship expertise. Margaret Donovan's public statements about the transformation emphasized the fundamental lesson we had learned: respecting other cultures isn't just morally right, it's economically essential in global business. Companies that dismiss cultural considerations as inefficient actually create massive inefficiencies through destroyed relationships and lost opportunities. 6 months after the reconciliation ceremony, Peterson Technologies' Asian Pacific division had generated over $100 million in new partnerships. Standing before the International Business Cultural Competency Conference in Seattle, I shared our story with an audience of corporate leaders, cultural consultants, and international business professionals. The audience included dozens of newly hired cultural liaisons whose positions had been created because our example had demonstrated the measurable value of cultural expertise. Companies across multiple industries were investing in cultural competency training, international relationship building, and respectful global business practices. My presentation concluded with the life lesson that had emerged from our journey success in business. Like success in life depends on understanding that different people define value differently, and that true efficiency comes from building relationships strong enough to withstand cultural differences, rather than ignoring those differences in pursuit of short-term convenience. The standing ovation that followed felt like validation, not just for my personal journey, but for everyone who had ever been told that cultural understanding was unnecessary in modern business. We had proven that respect for others creates measurable value, that diversity strengthens organizations, and that the most efficient business practice is treating every person and every culture with the dignity they deserve. Has your workplace ever dismissed cultural considerations as unnecessary complications? How do you think companies can better balance efficiency with respect for different perspectives? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, whether you've experienced cultural challenges in international business or have ideas about building more inclusive corporate cultures. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with others who might benefit from understanding how cultural competency creates business success. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for your expertise and values in professional settings. Thank you for joining me on this journey from devastating termination to career triumph. May you always have the courage to fight for respect and understanding in whatever challenges you face.